Mr. Deputy, what I know is this. The 10,300 acres was owned entirely by Bahamians first. And then they ended up being owned, he says, 50% by foreigners. Well, it ain't 100% Bahamian on no more, but they just put Bahamians first. That's what I'm saying. Mr. Speaker, this is the group that had no difficulty renting bleachers on Bay Street for our national cultural festival for $1 million to foreigners. Had no difficulty for 1 year. And could you imagine the entrepreneurial income that Bahamians could have had as they now have from that kind of rental? Bahamians first. Put 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 Bahamians first.
The point of order, member for West End.
The point of order, Mr. Speaker, is that the member for
order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Member for West End of Bimini.
The member for Marco City has said that the bleachers that were rented for the Junkanoo Festival were rented from foreigners. Mr. Deputy, those were rented from a Bahamian company in the Bahamas. What's the name of the company? Otherwise, tell him to put the contractor on the table and prove otherwise. That's all he has to do.
Member from Marco City.
He knows the people. High Tower out of Canada. I say no more. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, this is the group. Mr. Deputy, when I was out of office, when we were out of office, I'll never forget. I went to Bimini.
Order, please, members. There's a member on the floor.
I'll never forget. I went to Bimini one time. I was out of office then, and boy, I was in the airport waiting to go back home. And all I could hear, solo hablo un poquito de español. In the hundreds, buenos dias, muchos gracias, señor. I mean, in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. This is Bahamian first people. Those people were all hundreds of Latins working in Bimini, but they put Bahamians first. And in Grand Bahama, people were starving looking for jobs, but they put Bahamians first. All I say, Mr. Speaker, is we know we can. Mr. Deputy, Mr. Deputy, Mr. Deputy, they say...
Members, there is a member on the floor. Member from Marco City.
Mr. Speaker, the Member of Parliament for Elizabeth, made one of the most ridiculous claims I have ever heard in this Parliament. He said that, and I quote, by any objective standard, the Bahamas is insolvent. Mr. Speaker, aside from being blatantly untrue, no right-thinking sitting member of this place would want to say such a thing about our country, especially in the face of evidence to the contrary. Do you know what the implications are of such a thing for the people of this nation, Mr. Deputy? By his very statement, he is suggesting that no one should lend or credit to the Bahamas government. That includes any overdraft facility at the Royal Bank of Canada to pay the salaries of the 20,000 civil servants. Because the country is insolvent. It means that civil servants in the thousands should be sent home. That no one should accept $1 from the Bahamian government. Mr. Deputy, the IMF,
members in the gallery, member from Marco City.
The IMF, it means
member from Marco City.
Sorry, sir.
Members in the gallery, I'm going to ask you just to please be quiet. Member from Marco City.
Mr. Speaker, it means that the IMF should come and put the Bahamas on a program. And the list could go on and on. Mr. Speaker, how can a man who claims to be a financial guru say such a thing? How can he suggest that when we are a Standard & Poor's BBB credit-rated country? How can he say that and suggest that we are in the same position as, say, a Greece, for instance, that has a B- credit rating? How can he say that when every credit rating agency in the world gives us an investment grade credit rating? You just go down the credit rating list, Mr. Deputy, and you will see that Standard & Poor's has some 12 levels of credit rating. We sit in the 4th position from the top. How do you be insolvent and have that kind of rating? It just makes no sense, Mr. How can, no, he hurt the Bahamian people's feelings, Mr. Speaker. You are not Bahamian. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Little brave. Little brave. Little brave. Little brave.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is, if we are insolvent now, well, you could imagine what we were when they were in office. Let me show you, Mr. Speaker. This shows what, this shows what the government's overdraft position was in 2002. This was the overdraft position. On April 30th of 2002, the government's overdraft was $88 million. On the next date, it was $86.5 million. On the following day, that's election day, it was $89.3 million. In 2007, this is 2002, this was when they came into office. In 2007, Mr. Speaker, this is what the overdraft position was. In 2007, $102 million. $102 million on May 1. $97.2 million on May 2nd, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, look what the overdraft position is today. It is $50.8 million. Insolvent? Mr. Deputy, this is what the advances from the COB was. And as you can see, Mr. Deputy, the last bar is the blue bar that shows what your available capacity is, what your available balance is. When they took office, the available balance was $7.8 million. When they left office, the available balance was $20.2 million. Today, the available balance is $85.2 million. Insolvent? You all put BDC money in that? Mr. Speaker, the government is also able to float treasury bills to get some short-term money. And Mr. Speaker, once again, you can see what the yellow bar shows, which is available capacity. And you can see that when they took office, it was $23.8 million. When they left office, it was $28.1 million. Today, it is $48 million. And just in case he doesn't really get the point, Mr. Deputy, just in case, our foreign reserves and our liquidity reflects the strength or supports the strength of the Bahamian dollar. Well, I want to show him something, Mr. Deputy. These are the external reserves of the Bahamas. On May 1, 2002, when they took office, it was $373.5 million. On May 1st, 2007, just before they left office, it was $663.8 million. Today, the foreign reserves of the Bahamas are $1.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, bank liquidity. When they took office, bank liquidity was $105.3 million. When they left office, it was $253.5 million. Today, it is $579.5 million. Insolvent? Now show us the $4 billion there. Mr. Speaker, you know, I know what the difficulty is, you know. I pulled off the internet the professional biography of the member for Elizabeth. This is from Becker and Poliakov. Becker and Poliakov. And you see, because, Mr. Deputy, I have to confess to you, I was insulted. I was insulted by what he said, because if somebody took him serious, it could have had serious implications for our country. But I was also insulted by how he spoke of my alma mater and yours, the College of the Bahamas. Me and you, when we graduated high school in the Bahamas, we went to the College of the Bahamas. Okay, many of us. We went there to our college, the COB graduate, so we knew what was going on at COB. But this member suggests that our college does not provide technical programs for male students. That's offensive, such as engineering, he said. Notwithstanding, he could have gone on the same internet I pulled his biography off and gotten that information. But I just found it interesting. I understand why this Bahamian issue is a little challenging for him. You know, because I looked at, and I was very interested to see, you know, these are the Bahamian first folks who, many of them are able, and I don't begrudge him for doing so, able to make a handsome living serving foreigners. Because he's a tax attorney. You don't need to be no tax attorney in the Bahamas for me, because I don't pay income tax. The only time I need you as an attorney is if I mess up and take the government money and don't pay the government. But income tax, etc., that kind of sophisticated business, that's a foreign business in the Bahamas. But this says here that the gentleman is a shareholder and board certified tax attorney in the firms of the tax law group. Assists with not poor people, you know, high net worth individuals, as well as domestic and foreign corporations, partnerships, and limited liability. And then I saw this section said activities and memberships. Said that he serves as a mentor in the Fort Lauderdale-based helping abused, neglected, and disadvantaged youth. So I understood why he was challenged to know what was happening in the Bahamas. Now I understand. Mr. Speaker, the budget, they say, ignored crime. And the right honorable member for North Abaco spoke very eloquently to this matter, but Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to, Mr. Speaker, note that that mantra of theirs was also spoken to by the Member of Parliament, or written about by the Member of Parliament for Cat Island. And our able chairman produced a response to the member, which I wish to read into the records of the House. He said, Brave Davis, the deputy leader of the PLP, is feebly trying to lift his profile. The only difficulty is he's trying to do so on issues that he and his party totally lack credibility. In his most recent letter to the press, he makes absurd claims. He stated that Bahamians must be, end quote, scratching their heads and wondering how it's possible that Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham, in his budget presentation in the House of Assembly last week, did not think that the country's escalating crime problem was important enough to be one of his government's top priorities. This, of course, is not true. However, it does support what we in the FNM have long known. The PLP mistakes words for action. The fact is that the crime-fighting agencies of the country, that is, the police, defense force, and prison, have all received increases in the upcoming budget. They are receiving collectively $201 million, which is $15.6 million more than they received last year, and $34 million more than they received under the PLP in its last budget. Next to education and health, crime-fighting agencies will receive the second largest allocation among government agencies at 13% in 2011-2012 budget. This is more than the percentage allocated by the PLP in their last budget, notwithstanding that then Prime Minister Perry Christie said in 2006-2007 budget communication, we are putting in place ambitious but achievable programs and strategies to move aggressively to attack the problems of crime and illegal immigration, which together constitute the greatest source of worry and anxiety for the Bahamian people. End quote. Action, not words, is required. He said, the chairman goes on to write, the Attorney General, Judiciary, and Magistrate Courts together will get $32.4 million, which is $6.7 million more than they were allocated last year, and $3.3 million more than the PLP gave them in their last budget of 2006-2007 before they were kicked out of office. Action, not words, are required. Brad Davis says it was political expediency that made the FNM make job creation and training our main focus in the upcoming budget. He was clearly talking about the PLP under Perry Christie, which had 4 years consecutively of double-digit unemployment, with as many as 19,000 Bahamians unemployed, and did precious little to address the hardship over that period. Faced with the worst global economic crisis since the Great Depression, the FNM quickly moved to put in place an unemployment benefit program that has assisted 21,249 people with some $32 million in payments as of April 30, 2011. A 6-month job program that gave more than 2,500 Bahamians work, and an infrastructure program that created thousands of construction jobs for Bahamians. The PLP did none of this, but only benefited from a more positive world economy and the third phase of Atlantis left behind by the FNM. Brad Davis talked about using the people's money as a campaign war chest. Is he serious? Says the chairman. Just weeks before the general elections of 2007, the PLP hired many hundreds of persons in the government and signed more than $80 million worth of contracts that were not provided for in the budget. The criterion for getting a job was that you got applications from a PLP candidate. This is not the FNM way. We wanted to use public funds for campaigning. If we wanted to use public funds for campaigning, we would not have announced publicly what we are doing for the Bahamian people. Nor would we have provided constituency allowances to every MP, FNM and PLP, including some $250,000 in our budgets to be directed in their constituencies. We are not like them, says the chairman. Mr. Davis says the
order, please. Order.
And hiring program should last 2 years and not 1 year. He says this is electioneering. Well then, why did the PLP hire the hundreds of workers as they did just weeks before the general election for 6 months? The chairman, I think, answered that point quite clearly. Mr. Deputy, let me just say this. One thing in this, on this point. Mr. Speaker, crime is, without doubt, a very troubling and vexing situation. It is a serious situation, and there's no question that from time to time, on both sides of the political divide, comments have been made in respect of crime that simply are not supportable by the realities of crime. Mr. Deputy, the reality is this, and I often point to it as an example. For those of us who believe the Bible, a perfect God, a great and masterful leader, excellent, intelligent and policing skills, excellent programmer, a perfect God, put 2 perfect people in a perfect garden. They produced 2 perfect children. And in the environment that they were in, no joblessness, no shortage of anything positive to influence them, and inclusive of direct interaction with Almighty God, in that perfect garden, one brother murdered the other brother. 25% of that population was murdered, and 25% of the population murdered in the Garden of Eden. And I think to myself, why did not a God who knows all things, who is all present, who can do all things, not prevent, not stop that murder? What could explain that? I think it points to a fact, Mr. Deputy. Even God regards the will of man. And that when a man chooses in the secret of his heart to kill, to steal, to murder, you can try all you want. You cannot prevent that from happening. You can punish the you can punish the crime. You can punish the crime. You can go after the criminal. But Mr. Deputy, you have to have regard for what happens. There are many things that we can and should do. There's no question about that. To minimize crime, Mr. Deputy. Many things we can do. That is why those of us who are parents, those of us who are fathers, those of us who are responsible parents have to do the kinds of things that we have to do to rear and raise our children in the way that we need to go. But at the end of the day, Mr. Deputy, out of one household can emerge the preacher or the priest and the criminal. Same household. Because choice is the single most significant element in what happens in a society. It is choice. And they can bark all they want at that point. That is a reality that they cannot run from. Mr. Speaker, when we came to office in May of 2007, we in this country were grappling with two competing forces. One force was the delusions of economic grandeur sold by members opposite as to the state of our economy. The delusions of grandeur that told us that the country had a $30 billion investment boom taking place in anchor projects. $5 million in tourists, you all remember that? You remember those figures? 5 million tourists. That we had unprecedented levels of credit growth. And government finances were stretched to good limits. That there was a domestic investment board, invisible, but there was one. And we had unprecedented levels of growth. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, it was an illusion. Then there was the reality of an economy frailer than people thought and coming under pressure. How? Just check it out. The growth was slowing. That's already a fact of history. The unemployment rate on May 2006 was 7.6%. On May 2007, before we had done anything, was 7.9%. How does a growing economy have unemployment that stays flat or rise? Mr. Speaker, it had declining tourism numbers, Mr. Deputy. Growing deficits, Mr. Deputy. It had a growing debt to GDP ratio. And it had a national debt that had swollen by more than $800 million in 5 years as compared to $700 million in the 10 years before.